All right, fig lovers, this is Ross the Fig Boss. In today's video, we are talking about pruning fig trees. We're talking about how much exactly you should be pruning or cutting back your fig tree. The tree behind me here that we're looking at today is called Ronde Bordeaux. It's one of my larger trees, definitely by at least size, because it grows so much. And one of the reasons why it grows so much is because it's pruned a lot in the wintertime. And this could be a very bad thing, because if you are finding information out on the internet about pruning your fig tree, almost all of the articles on the internet will tell you prune your fig tree by a third, prune all the branches back by a third, do heavier pruning. I have found over many years now, guys, of growing fig trees, I've had literally trialed hundreds of different varieties. Everybody's fig tree is different. Everybody's situation is different. And for the majority of you guys watching right now, I mean the overwhelming majority, probably 90 to 95% of us, we should not be pruning our fig tree much at all. And if you are going to do some pruning, we'll talk about some of the ways and techniques that I use to, let's say, keep your fig tree small. We're going to talk a little bit about if you just needed to keep it, just make it smaller a little bit here for the winter time. We're going to talk about that. But the main goal of pruning is to change the hormones in our trees. And when we do winter pruning specifically, when the trees are now dormant, you can see we had a frost. The trees got hit by that frost and is now dropping its leaves. It's going to sleep. And so when that happens, and we do this winter pruning, the hormones in our trees and all of our plants are changing in a way that favors growth the following year. It actually discourages fruiting. The hormones change, they're in a balance. And I've talked a lot about this. Just like you and I, we have different hormones in our bodies and they're all in balance. If I had all of a sudden too much estrogen, well, that would not be good for my body. So the same thing's here happening with our fig trees, in that if we have too much of the hormone that tells our fig trees to grow and not enough of the hormone that tells our fig trees to fruit, we're going to have a fig tree next year, because of the pruning that we did now, is going to grow a very large size. And you guys have seen, I'm sure, I did videos on how big do fig trees get, how fast do fig trees get. If you prune a fig tree like this one here behind me, and I prune it very low, let's say I cut off a third of all the branches, or let's say I even cut off most of the tree the following year is going to respond, depending on the variety, depending on where you're growing. Your tree could grow easily 7, 10, or 15 feet in one growing season. So we have good intentions, right? We want to have our fig tree small. A lot of you guys watching right now are wondering, how can I get it smaller? But when we do the pruning, we're actually making it so that it's actually going to grow bigger next season. So let me show you guys a couple of things here. Again, this is my Ronde Bordeaux, and I have, at the base of this particular tree, we have a lot of trunks. So this is forming what's called a bush, not a tree. I call them fig trees, but they're really, this in particular, this case here is actually a bush. Now, what's nice about this tree is that it's quite open. A lot of the branches and a lot of the trunks from the base, you can see how far out and almost horizontal this tree has grown. Part of that is because of staking. And you can see this stake I have here in the ground. It's not doing a whole lot right now, but opening up the center of our trees can allow us more light into the center. And that way we don't have to do as much pruning. So one of the easy fixes that we can do, guys, is if I can stand in the middle of my tree and still get hit by the sunlight, and most of the branches around me are getting hit by sunlight, well, I know that my tree is going to be very productive next year, and I really don't have to prune it much. So if there is a branch like this one here in the center, is the only single branch basically in the center, I could come in here and cut this whole thing out. And I don't mean detailed pruning where we cut the branches back by a third. I mean cut the entire thing all the way back to the lowest point we can. And that is then going to encourage this tree next year to have the right light that it needs. And that's really all pruning is about. It should be about focusing on the hormones and also about maximizing sunlight the following year. Now, let's say if we want to keep this thing smaller, we first have to identify where are the tallest points on our tree. And you can see the tallest point on this particular tree is back over here next to the butterfly bush. It's actually growing right above. I have another small fig tree here next to it. This one's called Figo Moro da Caneva. And this Ronde Bordeaux is now growing basically over top of it. It's obviously getting very difficult if you were to wrap this tree and protect it in the wintertime. It's getting too big, and most of us don't really want large trees, because then if we have to come up here and reach for the fruit, well, we have to pull the branches down, harvest the fruit, or it's just too big for us and we need a ladder. And no one really wants a ladder in a backyard setting. It's just not something you want to have to deal with. So the best way to do this, to remove this really high growth, is to either remove all of the high growth as far back as you can. So I could essentially, let me shake this part of the tree. I could just remove this whole thing here and also remove this whole thing here. These are the highest points on the tree, and cut them back to a lower height. Or I can come in here all the way at the base and I can remove the entire trunk with a saw. And by removing the entire trunk, by the way, what's going to happen is we're going to remove the growth in the center of the tree, and we're going to remove all of this shaking right here, which is then going to control the size of the tree, and it's going to keep our tree in hormonal balance. This excessive pruning that we do, if we cut our branches back very far, rather than leaving a third, or let's say 2/3 of the growth, by cutting a third away, we're actually encouraging our tree to still remain in hormonal balance. Because we still have all these other branches here that exist. If I was going to do any pruning on my tree, that's exactly what I would do, is cut out that entire trunk right there. Because then I have actually this branch right here that's going to come in and take its place. It's going to grow in that position, and it's going to form what's called a recycling process. So if you cut out something really extreme like that all the way at the base, a big system of branches with many branches on it, and we cut it all the way down there at the soil level, well, something else is going to grow in its place at some point, and that's the recycling that happens. Now, I could also get a stake and just put it in that spot. If, for let's say it's not getting enough sunlight, I could force branches in that location that's then smaller. And the next year, it's then going to branch out, form the same system of branches that we see here behind me that I just cut out. And that way, we're keeping it consistently smaller. There's always these new shoots here that come up from the base on our fig trees. That's the beauty of it. If you wanted to keep it smaller, you basically just come in here at the base and cut out 1 or 2 of the trunks, or even if you had a tree, you can cut out the scaffolds. Cut out 1 or 2 of the scaffolds every year and let a new scaffold grow in its place, and you just recycle that year after year. It's the simplest and easiest process. But if I was to go in here and let's say cut a third of all the branches back and just say, okay, well, I want to take that large branch over there by the butterfly bush, and I'm going to just bring it back by, let's say, 2/3 or even a third, what's going to happen is the tree is going to respond hormonally in a way that's unfavorable, and it's going to grow and not fruit next year. So it's the same thing with all these branches, because believe it or not, at the tips of all of our branches are different buds. And these buds have a different hormonal component. They have a much higher likelihood of fruiting. You can see even up here as well, these may be where the brevas form. Not only do we have new buds that form new branches, but there's also buds right here that form brevas if this was a breva producing variety. So we could be potentially, by cutting a third away, we could be eliminating the first crop, the breva crop, but we're also eliminating the buds that are hormonally in position to fruit very heavily next year. And so if we remove basically the third top of the branch, I mean, it really is, by the way, a third, you could count and you could visually see the buds here that are more protruding. They seem to have more energy at the tops of our branches rather than the bottoms here of the branches. This is all vegetative growth that will form next year. Everything up here is going to be fruiting wood next year. So, you know, fig trees are different than other fruit trees. I actually would not recommend cutting a third away from really any of your fruit trees, let alone fig trees. A third is just going to really cause your trees in the wintertime, if we do that pruning, to be in that hormonal imbalance that I talked about on all the fruit trees. In fact, if you really want to control the size of other fruit trees and help them fruit, things like pears and apples, persimmons, even stone fruits, you want to prune them in the summer, because the balance of hormones that changes when we prune in the summer actually favors fruiting rather than growth. So that's the main argument here, the main crux of my thing is that just the information that we find on the internet everywhere. I just did a quick Google search, came up with this website called Masterclass. If you have a website called Masterclass, you should really know what you're talking about. Instead, guys, listen to the information in this video. Check out my blog, figboss.com. This is my own information based on my own observations for many years. This isn't just regurgitated information that I've picked up from somewhere and I'm telling you guys to do this. So thank you for watching. Please hit the subscribe button as well. Hit the like button. Check out my blog, and we'll see you guys for the next video. Take care.